And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba and the BatFlip, episode 110, continuing our positional previews for the 2022 fantasy baseball season. Heading over to first base, a fun position as always. It was fun reviewing it. It'll be fun previewing it. It will not be as long as the catchers episode. No, it probably will be, but it's not because, the love for catchers isn't quite there. But we'll get you covered. Normal rundown, like top 10 ADP, some longer shots, some ADP, some awesome listener questions, and much, much more. You can find me on Twitter at BDentric and my co-host, as always, on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Toby, how we doing, man?
We're doing all right, Bubba. We're just plugging along. I'd say I wish I could promise that it's going to be shorter than the catcher preview, but there's one thing that they both have in common, which is my blabbering mouth. So we'll see. We'll try to keep it. We'll try to keep it a little low. We'll actually consolidate. We'll actually do all 10 of the first basemen who are identical, and we'll just do those as a lump. And then we'll tackle the guys who actually have maybe like a little bit of character, a little bit of differentiation between the pack. So,
yeah, your tweet about that was so funny because there is like just a wheelhouse of so many like such similar profiles. It's funny at the position, so it makes drafting interesting, like we've talked about before. So we'll definitely get to some of those as well. But yeah, you knocked out 2 catcher podcasts last week. We have first base this week. I don't remember what position we have coming up Sunday night as our guest on the Toolshed podcast, but
we're third base.
Third base. Okay, so we mixed it up because they wanted us for catchers too, but we said I think enough's enough. So,
man, this is going to be a busy fantasy baseball weekend. It's like on Friday night there's the Pitcher Con Poker, and then on Friday morning I have my panel with now we can talk about it. Chris Walsh and Nando DeFino. Sorry, Nick, for ruining that surprise last time. And then Bubba, when's yours happening?
I'm doing mine. You're probably listening to the show on Wednesday at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific with myself, Joe Pisapia, and Matt Williams. So we'll be dropping that one as well. So I'll get that Wednesday. You got yours Friday. We've got another show Sunday night. And I always have way more other shows to do. So it's going to be a fun-filled week.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So should be a lot of fun.
All right. But yeah, keep on the lookout for that. Again, go to PitchCon on pitcherlist.com. They have a link to it this year where you can donate and all that good stuff, plus all the links to the videos. And it's more consolidated this year because I know in years past it was like there's a StreamYard link for like the first half of the day and the second half of the day. And so it seems like there's only like one link a day. So it'll make it a lot easier just to watch. You don't have to like move around and see things. So that'll be a ton of fun as well. Yeah. And I probably won't be there because I never make it to the pitcher list or PitchCon poker night on Friday night for the presenters, but Toby goes and Toby usually wins. So we'll see how that goes.
I win 50% of the time.
Yes.
One for 2, I think. Or 1 for 3. I can't remember. Yeah, I think that's
pretty good ratio.
Maybe the only victory I ever get. But the good news is, like, for the next 10 years, I can just be like, I win like 25% or I win 20%.
You can say
sounds
you won.
pretty good.
That's all that matters.
So I am a winner.
You are a winner. You're a winner in my books. So that's all that matters. So let's go. Let's go to first base here. Lots and lots of fun. Real quick, though, let's talk strategy at the first base position. Obviously, catcher has a different type of strategy because do you want to go early? Do you want to wait? 2 catchers, so on and so forth. First base, like we talked about in the review, and we'll talk about again, it's some top-heavy studs, then it's kind of different groupings that kind of drop in drafts. Like you have like 2 or 3 guys together, then a drop 2 or 3 guys together, so on and so forth. How are you attacking first base?
Yeah, we have some questions, some really good listener questions too on this kind of strategy piece. I think, the general, first base is kind of just a perceived value, I should always call it, because we don't know whether it'll end up being a value. But, it just seems like there's a lot of guys who are pretty good where they're going ADP wise. And I think the major strategic question you have is, do you pay up? Like Vlad Jr. is kind of in like a category. I'd say, yeah, Vlad Jr. is kind of in a category on his own. I mean, Freddy Freeman belongs in there as well, just because of the kind of history and batting average and everything that he contributes. It's actually like a fairly interesting comparison with Vlad. Obviously, Vlad has some more power. But then there's just that like chunk of first baseman, Pete Alonso, Paul Goldschmidt, Matt Olson, even Jose Abreu, I would count in that are kind of like have a little bit more of a track record. maybe you're expecting a little bit more production, but you also obviously have to pay up for it. And while they don't seem like they're bad picks per se where they're going, certainly there's a lot of depth to the position, which we covered in the review. And then there's like that chunk of first basemen starting with Josh Bell, Jared Walsh, Joey Vado, Reese Hoskins, CJ Cron, Anthony Rizzo to a lesser extent for me, but like Trey Mancini. There's just a bunch of guys who are kind of all in there together who are going to give you, depending on which guy you go, like either, kind of somewhat subpar batting average to somewhat above par batting average with like 25 to 35 home runs. And like, literally, they're just like puzzle pieces. Like, oh, you want the guy who has a higher average like Josh Bell? Well, he's probably going to hit you like 5 home runs fewer than Reese Hoskins, but Reese Hoskins going to hit 240, And so just really like, a group of guys that are there that are just, I don't mind pretty much all of them where they're going in the drafts right now. And then later on, there's a lot of potential guys who could jump up into that range, or maybe even into the more elite guys, depending on what the ceiling is, like, Dalbeck and Lowe and Belt and my favorite Yuli Gurriel. So it's an interesting position. It's super deep, and it's one that you really should think about before you draft about how you want to handle it, because I think, I think that can dictate like a lot of, I don't know how the draft generally plays out. Especially in that kind of like middle 100s round where all those other first basemen are going. So just doing that value proposition of, do I want, a Goldschmidt and a, whoever the outfielder is there, or do I want the outfielder who's going at, pick 55, and the first baseman who's going there, and just kind of doing those types of, internal conversations about which approach you want to take. And I don't think there's a right or wrong approach, not just necessarily. I've definitely been much more inclined. I haven't taken any of the top first basemen yet. So I'm more inclined towards that kind of middle of the pack, group. But I think either way you tackle it, you just got to be thinking about how that sets you up, as you build your roster out, and, the usual discussions you have to have with yourself, or maybe you like just sit in your bed at night and you think about these types of things.
You just draw all the different scenario charts. If I pick A, I got to go to C. If I pick C, I got to go to D. And the graphs just start forming, like Jenny Butler wrote about actually in the FTN draft guide, like the different flow charts. It's really genius strategy. I know Ryan Bloomfield's talked about it a lot too. Is kind of planning out your draft picks. Kind of, if you pick this player, then this, and every position technically as a team building situation. But like you said, first baseman is a big one. Like, because outside of a couple guys, you're not going to get a ton of steals usually. Like, you'll get a few, but not a ton. So you leave those for the outfield and the middle infield more often than not. So you're looking at these guys, like you said, especially if you wait. Do I want the power guy? Do I want the batting average guy? Do I want there's different pockets for what you're looking for, and there's more than one of them, which is nice. You don't have to kind of like force your hand type situation. So like if you want to go third baseman early because you don't like the later third baseman, we can go later first baseman. Or you can get a decent first baseman early and get another first baseman for corner infielders. You don't have to mess with third base. There's a lot of good options there. I'm with Toby. Like, I think I have like one Freddy share, maybe. I don't know if I even have a Freddy share. I have a Vlad share now.
You have a Vlad share.
Because you wonderful people in the Battle of the Podcast leagues let him drop to number 12 overall, you geniuses, you overachievers, you. Toby's drafting right after me. He's at 13. I'm at 12. And he texted me and goes, man, that's crazy. Like, basically crazy that Vlad fell to 12. I said, yeah, I spent 10 minutes searching news because I wanted to make sure I did not miss it. Because the day before I saw him sprinting and, getting ready for the season. I'm like,
yeah, best shot of his life again.
Yeah, like Rob Silver's tweeting things out, all excited, which means a lot, coming from Canada when it's that cold to tweet like that. So that was good. I was shocked. I didn't know what happened, so I couldn't pass it. I almost took Bryce Harper, thinking there was something weird going on, but I took Vlad. I'm like, we're taking Vlad. We're building around Vlad. But the thing is, when you do that, now you already, like, the whole point of taking hitters early is to get the 5 categories, to get the steals and all that kind of stuff. Well, obviously with Vlad, you maybe get 5. If you're like in a good year, you're gonna get 5 or 6, but I'm not counting like any really from Vlad. That's not my goal with Vlad. I want 40 plus home runs, hit for average, do those things. So you got to start building differently, which you'll see when you see my team. I tweet out there. It's definitely a different build for me. But saying that, that's why I usually don't take a first baseman early. I'd rather go get something like an ace pitcher or a Harper or a Luis Robert or something like that to kind of to build around, and I'll go get a later first baseman. So it's an interesting philosophy when you're building your team, and I 100% agree with Toby. It's one of those deals like sit down and kind of go, how do I want to build my roster? What do I feel comfortable building with? Do I want to get my stolen bases early because it's more comfortable that way and then go get another first baseman later? Or do I want to say, screw it, I'm going to get one of these elite guys we talked about with Goldie and Freddie and these guys that are pretty much almost right down their stat line. You're going to get it. Then I'll build around that later type deal. All those kind of ideas. And we'll talk about that when we talk about players and more listener questions coming up, because it's a fun position. It's a deep position, but not like a super like fantasy statistical deep position, if that makes sense at all. It's like very top heavy with the studs, and then kind of like 3 category guys, 2 category guys, like kind of pick your poison guys as we go through the rankings here. All right. With that being said, top 10 ADP for the NFBC the past 30 days. So that'd be from December 25th, Merry Christmas, everybody, to January 25th. We'll kick it off with Vladito himself. Not a whole lot that needs to be said here, but he's the man. He's going at pick 6 overall, a max of 10. That will change. Now it's 12. If I don't know if I actually qualify for this, though, but max should be 12 now. Thank you, everybody, again. But what do you have on Vlad, Toby, that you haven't said a million times on this show because everyone wants to give you a hard time about it?
Yeah, I'm not sure why anybody would doubt Vlad Jr. Throughout his career, he's really dealt with a lot of haters, and I'm not quite sure. I don't know where those people come from. And people come out of the woodwork to troll people like you wouldn't believe. In terms of Vlad for this year, he's great, and I think it's one of those first round picks where you got to debate. You feel pretty confident about, the underlying skills. Obviously, I mean, he's still ridiculously young, right? The dude isn't even 23 yet.
No,
guys. I mean, who would doubt like a 21-year-old with that pedigree, right? Coming into last season, who would do that? But the batting average looks great. The home runs, everything looks great. I mean, the stolen bases, the 4 was great. That's the major question, right? In the first round always is, if you're going to take a hitter that's that good, but you're not going to address speed, so that's the question that everybody's thinking about as they take him. But he feels like such a sure thing at this point. I think generally speaking, like when I look at the profile, everything looks really good. The contact rate was lower than it has been, in the past, but the plate discipline improved as well. And the in zone contact rate was right in line with his career average. So he's swinging at better pitches, and, he's making good contact with them. Obviously the quality of contact metrics were through the roof last year, which was one of the doubts that some people had heading into last year. We did see some massive drop in his ground ball rate, 10% drop in his ground ball rate. It'll be really interesting to see, like, over this year where that ground ball rate settles, because, oftentimes when you see those pretty significant drops in ground ball rate, oftentimes you see a little bit of regression back to the mean after that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's in like the 46 to 48 range, after this year, where there's been a very clear change in his batted ball profile to being less ground ball heavy, but maybe not as much as we saw this past year. He hit 75 barrels to get to those 48 home runs, which is fantastic. 15.1% barrel rate. The max EV is not something we've ever questioned. I think the biggest improvement that we saw last year was the exit velocity on line drives and fly balls. He was really able to, for the first time, to consistently hit the ball in the air, with authority, which, is a huge reason why he's, why he did exactly what he did. The home run per fly ball rate is at 26.5%, but again, he's elite when it comes to quality of contact. So when he does hit the ball in the air, when he does hit it hard, it's going to go far. So this is just a really long-winded way of saying the projections love him. They have him as a top 10 guy, no problem. Batting average is lovely. Home runs are probably going to be lovely. Their runs and RBI are going to be lovely in that lineup. So it's just a question of, the speed, and whether you feel comfortable grabbing him here and then grabbing some speed later. and it's not always that easy, right? Because you also have to think, especially this year, okay, well, at some point in the next couple rounds, I probably want to grab a starting pitcher. And then in the next couple rounds to a few rounds, I probably want to go after, a top end closer potentially. And so you really have very few selections early on in drafts, depending on how you build your team, obviously, where, you have to figure out what type of a base of hitting it's going to get you. So that was long on the number one player. I'll try to keep it short, but that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. He's very, very awesome. And like you said, it goes back to kind of how do you want to build your team. And I feel like I've attacked stolen bases in that league well, but starting pitching has a lot to be desired still. So it's kind of like you have to sacrifice something. And we've talked about it on this show and other shows that the starting pitching pool feels deeper than usual. Might not be with the elite players, of course, but deeper. So you might be able to go that route if you want, if you feel comfortable with it. But it does make it definitely interesting. But what Vlad does outside of hitting 40 plus home runs potentially and 100 plus in runs and RBIs, which is great, it's that batting average, like over 300. The projections, like you said, love him. He's one of, I think, just like 5 or 6 guys maybe projected over 300. Not many guys over 300. And there's a lot to be said about that in this world where like 250 is not horrible anymore. So you get a guy out there hitting 300, that can be tremendous as well. So he's awesome. Like you said, he's 23. We probably still haven't even seen the best of him yet, which is potentially just insane to think about when you look at it. And you mentioned like the contact skills. It's really weird looking at his stuff here because his contact is down and everything compared to like league averages, but it's just a testament to how good he is he doesn't chase that much. And when it's in the zone, he swings aggressively, like often. His like zone swing is way above average. His O swing's like slightly below average. So he's a patient guy, unlike his father, who just swung at everything, which you'd kind of expect, to run in the family type deal. That's how he learned. But it's impressive to see the discipline he shows you in the zone for a 23-year-old. Like we talk about Juan Soto's discipline, Vlad is another one of those guys. It's pretty crazy to think about those two guys getting the job done like that. So kudos to them as they continue on their mission of domination here. All right. The second first baseman off the board at pick 23 overall the past month is Freddy Freeman. As you mentioned, he's a good ball player. He's just another guy that he'll get a few more steals than Vlad, but the power won't be quite as much as Vlad. We don't know where he's playing, which is another thing as well. But it's one of those guys you can almost just pencil in, 25 to 30 homers, close to 100 runs, close to 100 RBIs, maybe like 90 to 100 in both of those. Pretty solid batting average. It's one of those, if you want to take the chance and build around it, it's not the worst thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's great. Last year was a lot of the same for him. The RBI were down slightly. I will say the BABIP was also down slightly. Like his career average is 339. He was at 321, which was on the lower side for him. Yet he still hit, 300. The interesting thing, like I don't know if it's a concern. I feel like he battled some injuries last year. But he had a 43% ground ball rate, which was a pretty big jump, about 6% from his career average. The last time he had a ground ball rate that was above 40% was in 2011, just to give you a sense of, kind of how out of character that low ground ball rate was. So depending on the way you view it, you could either see it as, the ground ball rate went up. Hopefully this isn't a sign of things to come, or maybe it's a sign of things to come. Which would hurt the power a little bit, and the batting average potentially, because he's always been a super high line drive guy. He's been one of the few guys that you can really count on that consistently high line drive rate from. Or you could also view it as, well, you want to know something? He still crushed things last year with a high ground ball rate. Maybe he's fully healthy this year. He gets it back to the normal range. And then you're talking about a guy who's hitting, 35 home runs instead of 31 home runs. I'm kind of interested to see over the course of the season how that ground ball rate went. So I'm just going to pull up my lovely rolling average graph right here, and hopefully it will load soon. So it really spiked towards the end of the season. So I wonder if, I don't know. Was he battling an injury at some point in time? I feel like it,
Probably,
but maybe not.
I can't recall one. I can look it up while you talk about him, but he's usually getting banged up with a hit by pitch or something all the time. But
Yeah.
let me look into it for you and see what I can find.
Yeah, I mean it's just it's a little bit noteworthy. It's the highest ground ball rate. You know, his last 40 games, that stretch of time was the worst 40 game rolling average ground ball rate that he's had in many years. Although it looks like in 2018 he had something similar. He had something similar in 2018, so not that long ago. It doesn't seem, you know, that it's kind of out of the ordinary, but not that out of the ordinary. So that would be my one little concern. But he's a professional hitter. You know, he's still really, really good. I think he's fine where he's going right now. In a lot of ways, like, you know, he's very comparable to Vlad, you know, in the sense that you can rely on the batting average, the home runs, you know, maybe a little bit light there. You can count on the runs and the RBI, and then he's also going to contribute a few stolen bases. Which is pretty nice from the first base position. So I think that's all I'll say on Freddie Freeman right there. I think he's a solid pick. Again, similar conversation to what you have on, you know, Vlad Jr. just about, you know, kind of what you're getting and this making up for the speed a little bit.
Yeah, no, he's going to provide you very similar to Vlad. That's the crazy thing is like if he gets that bounce back like you're talking about, where the ground ball rate and all that kind of stuff, and maybe the BABIP changes a bit, that can be quite tremendous for his coming back. But last year, no, nothing last year, nothing at all. So he was never on the IL one time last year. So he was healthy. He was very healthy. So we'll see how that one looks. But yeah, I like Freddie. I think he's very, very intriguing if you're willing to go there. But the fun thing is you can get similar profiles by waiting a little longer. And the third first baseman off the board at pick 54 right now is Matt Olson. And this is a very interesting one with Matty Olson because he's climbed up. He used to not be the third guy like a week or so ago. And people are really infatuated with him. You know, 39 home runs, which was great, but he hit 271. Strikeout rate dropped tremendously to 16.8%. The runs and RBIs both over 100 for the first time in his career. He had a career year in 2021. The A's are going to be worse next year. Matt Olson might get traded too. So that's something you can look into. But it's like a combination of, do the strikeout skills stay the same? Probably not likely. That's just kind of the way things go. And with the team changing so much, that runs and RBIs that helped make him such an elite talent last year, it's hard to see that playing out as well. So I have steered clear of Matt Olson so far, but there are some that absolutely love him, Toby.
Yeah, and I mean, he's very lovable. You know, he's a lovable guy. The thing that I'd say about Olson, like I think of all the first basemen, maybe like the first, I don't know, 20 first basemen or something. He's the one guy that really doesn't check out as like a great value for where he's going. Like just based on the projections, you know, I have, you know, a bunch of different first basemen. Let me just bring it up here. So of the first, so of like the first of, I mean, first base is just, you know, getting you a ton of value. And he's one of the few guys that actually isn't worth what his ADP is at the moment. Although I have his ADP in my spreadsheet as 50. And I think he's at like 56, at least in the last 2 weeks or something like that. 54 in the last 2 weeks. He's the one guy that I'm a little skeptical on. I think one good, like just, you know, from a process standpoint. So last year he had a 78.6% contact rate, which was the highest of his career, which is fantastic. It was a 10% increase from the shortened season, but only like a 3.5% increase from, you know, 2019. And so when you look at the strikeout rates, it's like contact rate of 78.6% and then a K rate of 16.8%, right? So slightly better than league average contact rate, way better than league average K rate. When he had a 75% contact rate, his strikeout rate was 25%. When he had a 74.3% contact rate, his K rate was 24.7%. So I feel like even if he's able to maintain the contact gains, which I'd be surprised if he were to able to maintain them, you know, at such an elevated point to his career, you know, I think you're looking at more of even like a 20% K rate or a 21% K rate guy, as opposed to the 16.8% K rate. So I don't believe that the batting average will stay in those 270s. I think, You know, his career average is 252. I think maybe slightly elevated from that, which is what a lot of the projections have, 257, 258. And I think you're looking much more at that. And then when you think about the fact that you're totally lacking speed, you know, from this guy, you know, then that, for me, that's kind of like, well, you know, I can get home runs and RBI later. Like if you look at like a guy like Josh Bell, who's going a lot later, you know, your batting average is going to be higher with a Josh Bell, most likely. You know, you're going to lose 10 home runs probably from Matt Olson. But, you know, you're going to have probably pretty similar runs and RBI from the guy, like given he's hitting behind Juan Soto. You know, and so that I think is like the conversation that's important to have, you know, and for me, Olson really is the guy who just kind of stands out as not being worth the pick. Obviously, if he replicates what he did last year, of course he's going to be worth it. But, you know, having career highs across the board does not feel like something that's super sustainable. I also wonder, like with the K rate, I don't want to like push my luck on this too far, but I just wonder if he's another like one of the 3-2 count guys where you just have like, you know, crazy better luck.
You nailed it. You nailed it once already.
I know. That's why I don't want to like go back to it, because what if I'm wrong?
I can't remember what player it was, but you nailed it.
It was Jose Berrios.
Yes.
It was Jose Berrios. Yeah. So let's see. In 3-2 counts. So yeah. So his K rate, the lowest K rate he had in his career was in outside of the 5 plate appearances he had in 2016 with in 3-2 counts was last year. 22.8% K rate in 3-2 counts compared to 28%, 28.9%, 32%, and 43.5%. He also had his highest walk rate in those counts last year as well. So he had like, so his walk rate was 36.2% and his K percentage was 22.8%. And then for his entire career, can we just do that? Can we do his career? Anyways, I'm too lazy to do that. So anyways, so like these are the types of things where, again, it's not going to work out with every single player, but like, it's kind of, I think it just shows how like one little thing like that in 3-2 counts, you have your best year ever can result in having your lowest K rate ever and your best batting average ever. And it's not necessarily something that we feel like should continue. And I know I've had some like back and forth with people who maybe think that like, oh, well, it's not luck. Maybe it's a change in their approach. And I'm pretty skeptical on that, honestly, because I'm just pretty skeptical because you have to have a pretty significant sample in order to determine whether it's an actual skill change that person is developing. And you don't get enough plate appearances within a single year in order to get that, right? You're probably getting, I can't remember what Olson had, but like 120 or something like that in a 3-2 count. And so you have to look at that broader sample to really get a sense of what they should be doing from a skill perspective in those counts. So again, you know, very long, but I would expect the batting average to drop, the K rate to increase. And as a result, like, I don't see why you draft Matt Olson.
Yeah, it stinks because like last year, last couple years, I've been pounding the Matt Olson drum for where he was getting drafted, which obviously isn't pick 54 overall. He was more like 1 to 150. It felt like, so it felt much more like doable. On my rankings I have out so far for first base, I have him as my 8th first baseman, and I got lambasted all over Reddit. Reddit was furious with me having him at 8th overall. And I think they can't read because I explained why I have everybody ranked where I literally wrote a paragraph on each freaking guy. But I like Matt Olson, but I'm also realistic. Like you mentioned, the things that could lead to regression, which now makes him like I have Josh Bell 9th. Like they're right next to each other. I see a lot of similarities in those two guys. Like, and you even look at, you know, you can look at Joey Vado and you can see similarities there. You know, if Anthony Rizzo gets to the right spot, maybe CJ Cron, like Olson fits into that group you mentioned earlier of potential first baseman so much better, which is still a very good first baseman. It's just his ADP so much higher now where taking him there, and it could work out great. Like Toby said, maybe he did make a change. Maybe he did. But if you said maybe someone made a change for all your picks, you're never going to win a league. I hate to break it to you, like, because they're not all going to make a change. It's going to backfire eventually. So you just got to make the decision. If you're a believer, like I know Carlos Marcano, amazing analyst. Congratulations to Carlos, nominated twice for FSWA awards. He loves Matt Olson. He's done research on Matt Olson. He believes in Matt Olson. Well, he's not a stupid guy. He's a very smart guy. So if he thinks that's what it is, more power to him. I'm going to be on the trepidation side of things on this one. So love Matt Olson. Kind of hope he struggles a little bit this year so I can get him cheap again next year. But that's where we are on that one. Now, if he gets traded to, like, say, the Yankees, things get a lot more interesting. More interesting. So that's kind of, I think some people are kind of drafting with that mindset as well because the Yankees have been rumored for that deal. So I think like the idea is that he's getting out of Oakland, which would already boost him pretty much like at 75% of the ballparks in baseball. So
he'd be perfect there.
Yeah. So there are things, sure, but as we sit right now, very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, smart people can disagree, Bubba. It just so happens that we're right.
Well, I don't want to get into life situations, but I wish we had more conversations in life that we could disagree on and still be friends. That would make life so much better these days. But the fourth first baseman off the board is Paul Goldschmidt, who was going third for a long time. He's going to pick 56, just a couple picks after Matt Olson. And we talked about on the review podcast, Goldie brought it last year. 31 homers, 12 stolen bases, 102 runs, 99 RBIs, 294 average. If you just like go back and look at his seasons, he's pretty much been like a 290 plus hitter almost every season. He's hitting you 30 plus home runs, like 4 straight full seasons, 5 of the last 6. He's driving in runs. He's scoring runs. He's even adding steals. Like they kind of disappeared for a couple seasons, but he had 3 double-digit stolen base seasons from 2015 to 2017. Stole 12 again last year. Like he can sneak in 10 plus steals. Like legitimately, the stat line he brought you last year should be going with Freddie Freeman area in the grand scheme of things. In my mind, if you believe in Freddie Freeman, Goldie should be up there. People don't believe, I think, in Goldie. He's going to be 35 this year. He's getting older. Ballpark still isn't the most conducive to offense in St. Louis. That's a big thing there. But he showed he could do it last year. It'll be his 3rd season there now. The lineup keeps getting better around him. You have Arenado, you have O'Neill taking the next step. There's stuff going on in St. Louis. I love Goldschmidt if you're willing to take the chance. I'm like, I'd rather take Goldie than Olson. That seems pretty simple in the grand scheme of things, but maybe not. But I'm a Goldie fan. I don't have any shares yet because people take him earlier than I want to. But he'd probably be, if I'm taking a guy early outside of the Vlad thing we talked about earlier, he'd probably be one of the first ones I'd be willing to take.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, he's a little bit different in the conversation. You know, I'd actually think of him similarly to Freddie Freeman in some ways because, you know, in 2021 he stole 12 bases, which you're like, that's fantastic. Let's do it again. But, you know, at the same time, like he only had 3 in 2019. He only had 7 in 2018. His projections are like 7 or 8 stolen bases, which I think is more reasonable, which is kind of more in the kind of Freddie Freeman range of that. But, you know, you're also getting him later in the draft. That's not to say he's as good of a hitter as Freddie Freeman is necessarily. I mean, he's close enough, but just there's like at least a little bit of a conversation about the stolen bases that he provides for you. But the consistency, like we mentioned in the preview pod, is just remarkable. You know, again, you throw out 2019, 294, 304, 290, 297, 297, 321, 300, 302, 286. You know, like you take every single one, you take all of that, right? Like you take every single one of those batting averages that he's had, except for 2019 in like the last 10 years, quite literally. So that's fantastic. You know, the hard hit data, the plate discipline, the contact skills are all so similar to what they have been. The max EV is great. And he's actually striking the ball more consistently. The barrels, you know, his highest barrel rate ever in 2021. You know, so he's really, really solid. And I think it's, you know, I think he's a really solid pick right there. I mean, I don't think it's a terrible thing to like, especially if you start off with, you know, pocket aces or something like that. I don't want to go down that road too much because that's like my thing. But like, if you start out with something like that and he's your first or second hitter that you're grabbing, you know, you feel kind of good with the fact that you've built yourself a pretty solid foundation, consistency, you know, batting average, little bit of stolen bases. Feel pretty good about the counting stats and the home runs are all right as well. So I like him in that, I like him in that kind of sense. So Goldie's really nice. I agree that if I probably went with a first baseman in this region, I'd probably go with him. Although I do have like a little bit of a soft spot in my tummy for Big Meat Pete, the polar bear. But just to give you a sense, like what you mentioned between Olson and Goldie, Olson's going at what
like
I have
54 and Goldie's like 56.
Yeah, 54 and 56. And then for me, I have Goldie as about a $22 player, and I have Olson as about a $20 player, right? So there's a $2 difference. Goldie's going higher, so it's not like a huge difference, right? Like it can be made up, vary by a few home runs here, a few stolen bases here, a couple points in batting average. But when you think about like what it means later on as you draft and your roster construction, I would put like a couple bonus points onto that Goldie line, just because it does give you a little bit more 5 category contribution.
Yeah, he's like, I guess we said he's more similar to Freddie Freeman, kind of a poor man's Vlad, because he's not going to be as elite as Vlad, but you're getting him so much later. So it's like if you want one of the elite first baseman with one of the more consistent stat lines in baseball, it's fun. Like we talked about on the review show. I think I need to do it. Maybe do an NFBC 50 or something just to see how it goes. Just get the consistent. Like let me grab Goldie, let me grab Arenado, let me grab Altuve, let me grab like all these boring consistent stat lines and see how the overall thing fills out. It'd be kind of fun to see instead of going for like, oh, let's go get Kyle Tucker, let's go get Luis Robert, and see. No, let's just get these consistent like little just and see where it goes. It'd be kind of interesting to see how it goes. Like I'm not gonna go pay like $400 to go find out how it goes, but a little $50 for like a little test could be quite interesting. All right, the 5th first baseman on the board, Toby hinted at him. Going around pick 64 right now. Big Meat Pete, the polar bear, and he has a fun one because like we kind of talked about consistent steady eddies for the most part. Then you get to Pete, 37 homers last year, get 53 in 2019, the big season. We talked about it in the review show. Hit 262, we hit 260 in that big 2019 season. The strikeout rate dropped really nicely last year, kind of like Matt Olson did, but actually even not as big a drop as Matt Olson, kind of a maybe more believable drop in this one. I think what we saw last year is more like the consistency we can see with like Pete, 35 to 40 homers and whatnot, with the chance of a ceiling, which is really nice. So that's kind of the difference between the Goldies in this area, like you said, is okay, I can go get me like my 30-ish homers or whatever. Not as good of a batting average probably as the other guys. But if I want to try to get like 50 home runs, this is one of the guys in fantasy that can go get you 50 home runs.
Yeah, I mean, Big Meat Pete, like I've never drafted him on a single team. I've never drafted him, but I'm not going to lie. Like I know batting average and stolen bases are like what you should be focused on, right? Because the other things, they're available later on, right? And there's, some other things. But the thing about Pete, I'm a believer. Like I think that this guy is just a really good hitter. Like I think the batting average, is solid enough. Like I think, he's cut down the K rate, like you mentioned. Again, I think there's luck there. 76.7% contact rate, which is slightly better than league average, and he's down at 19.9%. I think the projections are right here where they have him like between 21.4 and 22%. I think that's much more likely to be the case, with league average around like 23.5, 22 seems more in line there. But even with that, like it's a decent amount of contact, that he's making. He's absolutely crushing the ball. We know the max EV is lights out 118.4. Barrels, he had 65 barrels for those 37 home runs. So a little bit down. Maybe earned or deserved a few more home runs there. But the dude can just hit. He's got a good plate discipline. Hits the ball in the air a decent amount. Like I just love everything. Like if I were to be like. He's like a guy where I'm like, man, I could make this pick and he's going to be good. Like I have no doubt he's going to be good. Got no doubt he's going to contribute. Whereas with like Matt Olson, I'm like, he could hit 230. Like I could see him hitting 230, 240, and really kind of hurting you a little bit there. I mean, Big Meat Pete, I'm like, you're going to hit 260, man. You may even hit higher than 260, you're going to absolutely crush the ball. Like you're just absolutely going to crush the ball. You're in an improved lineup, generally speaking, depending on where they slot people. But like Mark Kana has an absolutely fantastic OBP. Frankie Lindor can't hit worse than he did last year, right?
Brandon
so there's
Nimmo gets on base like crazy.
Nimmo gets on base like crazy. Like it's just, there's some really good things that could happen. Like, would I be surprised if he hit like 280 with 50 home runs and like 100 runs and 120 RBI? I wouldn't. He'd probably like steal 10 bases too.
Just a cherry on top.
He's Big Meat Pete the polar bear.
Yep.
So I don't mind this pick. I haven't made this pick.
So the bottom line is you need a pocket aces with JTR and Big Meat Pete.
Oh,
that's what you need to do. You need to focus on this.
Well, Big Meat Pete falls to me at like 70, pick 70 when I'm doing that. Like I might grab him there. I mean, he's the 38th ranked player. ADP
That's pretty good value.
Was 66 when I did it. I mean, over the last 2 weeks, he's at 71. So he's falling in drafts. Yep. So that might be a little bit intriguing because 38th best player, you're getting a tremendous amount of perceived value there, like in terms of the differential like between his ADP and his rank. I mean, $22, he's right ahead of Paul Goldschmidt, but going 15 picks later, I mean, that's pretty juicy.
Yep. It's going to be fun. I can't wait till I see that tweet come out where Toby takes Big Meat Pete. It's going to happen. I can feel it coming.
Oh, dude.
Unless someone just wants
a lot of money on the line. I'm just going to Big Meat Pete it.
But the thing is, if for like an overall, that's the kind of guy. That's the kind of dude for an overall, because if he hits that 50 home run mark, it's like when you look at later round picks, like I started digging into like post 200 draft picks just in general. There's a couple, maybe 30 home run guys, a lot of 20 home run guys. Ain't no 50 home run guys. So, and I know Pete's not post 200, but that just shows you the gap. Like in home runs that you say you can get home runs later, you can. You're not getting 50 home runs later. So it's a big difference how it works out. But that's kind of the risk reward of the situation. And I know yourself, and I usually am too, as I'm more of a risk guy later in the draft. But you might have to pay for some Big Meat Pete. That's just the way it's going to go.
And one thing to consider too is with the dip in power from last year, home runs are much more valuable. So like Big Meat Pete goes out and hits 50 home runs. Now 80th percentile in a draft and hold at least, I think is 310 home runs. So you're talking about a guy who's getting 1/6. He's getting you 1/6 of the way to 80th percentile if he gets that. I mean, we're speculating here. We're speculating on 50 home runs.
That leaves 12 other offensive spots to get the 5/6.
I mean, I think 13 spots, right?
I have 14
hitters. 14 hitters?
Yeah, 13 spots.
13 spots.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good. Just throw in a couple Miles Straws in there and you're still in good shape.
Yeah. I'm telling you, we're starting to build. Get Adalberto Mondesi. Hey, there you go.
I mean,
I saw you drafted him.
Adalberto's going 30-70 this year, dude. Yep. I mean, because I drafted him.
That's what I'm saying. You drafted him, so we saw it.
It's my one Adalberto Mondesi share. I got him at 73. Pick 73. I mean, at that point, I'm like, play 50% of the games.
Yep.
And,
we've said it before. I think people get mad when we say comments, I guess, or anybody says comments, I guess, but he's perfect for a DC because you drafted 2 or 3 other basemen. He's hurt, put another guy in.
It's true.
It's not like you don't have to go to the waiver wire and hope so and so is on the waiver wire. Like you have other guys you could throw in there. It's the perfect storm for having Mondesi.
I mean, the guy stole 17 bases in 126 at bats last year.
It's crazy.
If he gets to 300 at bats, he's stealing 30 bases, people.
His pace,
and he's going to hit
insane.
10 home runs. I mean, and he's so fun to have on your team because it's like
when he goes off, it's awesome.
Oh, dude, you're just like you check the box score every day. Like every time you're like on your phone and he's up to bat and he gets on first, and you're just like, oh hell yeah! And you're like,
just think
nobody else in front of him. He's getting second. He's getting third. Like,
just think about this. He's projected by the BatX ATC to play 120 or 121 games, hitches 17 or 18 homers, and still get anywhere from 38 to 42 bases in only 120 games. That leaves you 42 other games, 6 weeks of baseball for a replacement player. So you could potentially get like 30, 50, 30, 60 out of that position if you draft it properly.
Bubba, here's the deal. All right. In one of my DCs, which I will name Adalberto Big Meat.
Oh, do it.
I'm going to get Adalberto. And wow, it's going to be tough. I need them both to fall.
You can
but
call it Jam, JTR for JTR Adalberto and Big Meat Pete. Jam.
I'm gonna do those. I'm gonna rock that, dude.
Just punt
Oh my
pitching, do the
god,
total
those
opposite.
two on the same team, Adalberto and Big Meat Pete on the same team. That is a team I will root
when
for.
Toby wins the DC overall with that team. Just remember that.
God.
Yep.
Holy.
Okay, I'm reining us back in. 6th first baseman off the board here at pick 88. So we're taking a jump, basically 24 picks from Pete Alonso. A little less than 2 rounds in a 15-teamer, 2 rounds in a 12-teamer, of course. Jose Abreu, pick 88 overall. And he is another one of those kind of goalie types, the just epitome of consistency. Not going to hit for the average of a goalie. He's going to hit like more like 260, maybe run into a 270 if things click right these days. But he's going to hit you. He's going to get you another big power season, potentially like the 30 home run range more often than not. And what Abreu does so incredibly well because of that Chicago White Sox team drives in all of the runs, all but 2 seasons, one of which was the 60-game 2022 season. So all but one regular length season, he has had at least 100 RBIs, which is pretty crazy. That's 6 of 7 seasons, over 100 RBIs. Usually gets you 80-plus runs scored, but the power is there, average is decent, and he plays a lot because he DHs and plays first base. He's played over 150 games in 5 of his 7 full baseball seasons. This guy literally is the pencil it in, let's rock and roll, this is what you're going to get. So, again, and he's boring. People just don't want to draft him. He fell to 99 in our Battle of the Podcast draft. He's a stud, an absolute stud, but people just kind of like he's old. They don't want to deal with him, but as long as that DH is there, I don't see it being a problem right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's super interesting to me. I mean, another guy that I haven't drafted yet, but I just feel like is in for a really good year. We talked about this in the review pod, but there's so many similarities between last year and 2018. You know, in 2018, he had his second lowest batting average at 265. Last year, he hit 261. Those are the only 2 years that his BABIP has been under 320. Right? It's 324 for his career. You know, so there's some bad luck there. We look at the variance again, you know, like the inline drive rate. You know, he had the second lowest line drive rate of his career, you know, which is probably one of the reasons why, you know, you're looking at a guy who, you know, hit 260 instead of 270, 280 last year. You know, once that normalizes closer to what it has been throughout his career, you know, that batting average goes up a little bit. You know, and like he's just all around solid. Like the contact rate's great. It increased after it went down, you know, in that shortened season when he was so phenomenal. It's still down a little bit from previous highs, but you know, still enough where him hitting 280, you know, 290, I don't necessarily think is a problem. Not that you're going to bank on that happening, but I could definitely foresee that happening. Continues, you know, to hit the ball hard. 44 barrels last year, 10.2%. You know, barrel rate, you know, his max EV 115.6, you know, is rock solid there. So again, I think there's a lot to like about Abreu. I think you can look for, you know, similar contributions to what he did in 2019, you know, 284, 33, 85, 123. I think that seems, you know, within the range of possibilities. If you look at ATC, it's even got him at 266, 31, 86, and 100. You know, so you're just looking at a change in the batting average there to boost that up a little bit. So I think he's really good. He's very solid. You know, the same conversation, like a broken record around first baseman. You know, he doesn't have the stolen bases necessarily. And maybe he doesn't have the elite batting average because in his last 3 full seasons, 265, 284, 261. But, you know, again, a rock solid pick, a guy who's going to contribute. You put him in there. You're not really worried about a total stinker. Like he's gonna do some work.
Yeah, no, he's pretty darn awesome. Until it's like the Nelson Cruz thing. Until I see something weird take place, I'm just gonna keep trusting Abreu's gonna hit. He gets it done time and time again. So I'm with you on that one. The 7th first baseman off the board, going on pick 110, is Ryan Mountcastle. And I looked just for fun, like the last 2 weeks per se, since like news came out on the fence. It's 114. He's not dropping a ton. And he hit 33 home runs last year, hitting 255. Projections still have him for 31 plus. I know Andrew Perpetua did some research on the fence deal, and he's one of the guys that really doesn't get penalized a lot because his pulled home runs were just bombs, is what it comes down to. So we'll see how that plays out. But Mountcastle was a stud, rookie of the year type stuff, but I still have trouble grabbing him here.
Yeah, I haven't grabbed him much. I mean, maybe it's the plate discipline. It's not ideal. He swings at pitches outside of the zone a ton, 41.5%. His contact rate's low, 70.6%. So there's some concerns there with the elevated K rate and the really bad, O swing, like close to like league worst O swing type stuff. But obviously he was really good last year. So the question is like, is he just one of these guys like, an Eddie Rosario, like a Javi Baez, who can, and obviously El Garcia, who can be successful with that approach? I mean, if so, those guys have proven to be really valuable from a fantasy contribution perspective. So, again, like I don't mind it too much. I think there's a cap on that batting average right now because the strikeout rate, is so high, because the swing and miss is so high, the chase rate is so high. Obviously there's the Camden issue. We don't have a huge sample in terms of his home runs, again, so we can at least expect him to lose a couple. I think it's interesting that Steamer has him at the lowest. I know that Steamer has accounted for the change, in home stadium there with the 29 home runs compared to, between 31 and 33 for the Bat X and the ATC projections. So we'll see. So I don't necessarily mind it because of where he's going, is still, it's not super high up there. But when I think about like, him like versus like an Abreu or somebody like that, I'd rather kind of pay up a little bit more to grab an Abreu than I would a Mountcastle, just because we don't have the track record and because the plate discipline, gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies. But yeah.
Yeah, like I like Mountcastle. I liked him last year for his value. This year's a little different. Like I have him as my 13th first baseman, kind of after that next glob of guys we talk about, because like I feel like I can kind of trust what these other guys are going to put out there, which I like a lot more. Where Mountcastle, it seems like there's a lot of risk reward. The one thing I'll say is, like he is swinging a ton outside the zone, but his O contact's pretty close to league average, which is good. So he's making a ton of contact outside the zone, but. So he might be a bias type. We'll see. Time will tell. But like,
but is that good?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I am a Javi Baez fan, but that's because I've seen him do it multiple years. Where Ryan Mountcastle, that was his first full season in baseball, in Major League Baseball. So it's kind of the differences between the two. It's Baez has proven to me time and time again this is just who he is. And 1 year, I've admitted 1 year it's just going to fall off a cliff, and that's going to be horrible. Mountcastle's 1 year could be now because we haven't seen it ever happen again. So it's like if he does it again this next year, well, I'll kind of reevaluate things. I'll be like, okay, maybe this is who the dude is. Like legit could be him. And one thing to think about, if he's swinging outside the zone, I have to look like, is he swinging more on the outside corner or is it more on the inside pitches? Because if it's outside, with his power, he could flick it over the right field wall in Camden. We've seen that ball fly out of right field. And that way the fence has no big deal with what's going on. I haven't looked at any of that stuff. I have no idea. But he's a powerful guy, so it's not like he gets like some people when they're just chasing all the time, they're hitting weak ground balls and stuff. Where Mountcastle's a big, strong dude, so I'm kind of curious to see how that kind of plays out going into this next year. All right, the 8th first baseman off the board. He plays first base, second base, and third base. He's picked 116 overall, and he plays for everyone's favorite team, the New York Yankees. DJ LeMahieu. He played 150 games last year, which I would have lost a bet if you would have told me that, because he only hit 10 home runs, only stole 4 bases, hit 268. We found out now that he had an injury he was dealing with like all year. He's had surgery on that. He's supposed to be fine, but he's another one of those guys that I wasn't into last year. Is like he was very high ADP last year. He's much more, I guess, formidable to people that do like DJ LeMahieu. I've just never been a guy that can just, I don't know. I'd rather have Jake Cronenworth or something else in that range. So I've never been in on DJ LeMahieu, but what's your take? Because if he's leading off for the Yankees, there's a lot of merit to that still.
Yeah. Before I hop into the DJ LeMahieu, I just want to say there's a lot of pressure right now on Drew Morris.
Yeah. I'm on
There's a
deck.
lot of pressure on Drew Morris. It's currently midnight 06, 12:06 in Eastern Standard Time. And I know that Drew lives on the East Coast, but he is the only thing, ladies and gentlemen, standing between you, the listener, and Bubba and the BatFlip, both making draft picks in the Battle of the Pods League DC. Now, I'm doubtful that that's going to happen because I think he's probably asleep. But if he comes through, that could be stuff of legends right there. So with that said, because you all want to know who we're going to pick with in our 190th pick, so DJ LeMahieu, yeah, I really like DJ this year. I've talked about it. You're probably not getting him as a first baseman, although in one of my leagues I may end up with him as my first baseman. You're probably getting him for third, maybe for second, or whatever. But there's the triple position eligibility, which is beautiful. Like you mentioned, he was injured. And so if we, not that we can just like discount entire seasons, but, let's take out last season. His batting averages are, 364 shortened season, 327, 276, 310, 348, 301. You get the point, right? Like this guy hits for a very high average. And like you said, if he's hitting for a very high average, then he's getting on base at a pretty good clip. He's got good plate discipline. The O swing has been better than league average in all of the last 7 seasons. It was down at 25.6%, last year. He makes a ton of contact. He goes the opposite way. He should have a decent, a pretty good BABIP, career 340. So if you say like, okay, the guy's injured, he's going to get back to that, let's call it a 330 BABIP, 320 even, building in some regression. It's going to be juicy. And, last year he had 679 plate appearances as the leadoff hitter, and he only scored 84 runs last year for the Yankees. That's not something that's going to happen again. That's one of those things that you should be on the lookout for, is when a guy, when the runs per plate appearance is just way too low for where they are. He's got Aaron Judge behind him. He's got Giancarlo Stanton. He's got whoever the number 2 hitter is. I can't even think about it right now, but it's probably Judge, right? It's
should be.
Is that what their lineup is?
In the order a lot.
Well, let's see. What are the Yankees? What does the Yankees lineup look like?
It's always changing.
Show me. So you got, LeMahieu, Judge, Stanton, Gallo. Come on. This guy's going to score runs like crazy.
He better score runs by Stanton because Gallo's going to strike out, and then Gary Sanchez is going to strike out.
Yeah, that's true. And then Gleyber Torres is going to them all in his MVP
took Gleyber
season.
Torres too. I saw that.
I'll take a Gleyber. I'll take a Gleyber for sure. But you look at even his career home run per fly ball rate is 10%. Last year it was 7.7%. So that should go up. I think you're looking up at least 15 home runs from the guy, especially with that short porch. It's built for having a higher home run per fly ball rate than he's had, before. In his previous 2 seasons with the Yankees, he's at 19.3 and 27%. You add those 3 seasons together. I can't do the math in my head, but you're probably looking at a 15%, plus home run per fly ball rate over the course of those 3 seasons. And if that's the case, sign me up. He'll give you a handful of stolen bases as well. I really love where he's going. I think he can make your team better in so many different ways, from the flexibility to the batting average to the runs. He's beautiful.
Yeah, see, I agree with everything you said. That's why I need to just change my focus on DJ like I did with Brandon Lau already in a draft. It's one of those deals, but I feel like there's always someone in my drafts that likes him even more than I do. And they're just reaching for DJ LeMahieu. So maybe that'll change in redrafts because DC people favor that position eligibility a lot more potentially. So maybe it'll be a little different in another month when I start doing some redraft leagues to kind of maybe get some DJ, because the runs scored I think is going to be very, very nice with him. I'm with you on that for sure. So I might have to re-examine the DJ LeMahieu part of my process in this one, because at first base, yeah, you're right. You're not drafting over first base. It's nice to have in case you have injuries or whatever. So that you can slug them in there, but that's not the goal. That's not the plan when you're drafting TJ LeMahieu. All right, the 9th first baseman off the board, and in the last 24 hours, it has flip-flopped with number 10. So now the 9th first baseman off the board in the past 30 days is Jake Cronenworth, first base, second base, shortstop at pick 125. I love Rake. He had 21 homers last year, 4 stolen bases, 94 runs scored, hit 266. The projections still like him. Like, they don't think he's that much power, but probably some more speed. That Padres offense is going to need some work. So that's going to be interesting because that overall team does not look as great as it could look. But I like what Cronenworth can do. And he was banged up off and on last year too, and still put up a rather solid set of numbers. That's why it's fun kind of comparing him and DJ LeMahieu for me.
Yeah. Yeah, he is interesting. I mean, I think the batting average is obviously, I think the batting average ceiling is a lot lower, than LeMahieu necessarily. The power, is pretty comparable. He hit 21 home runs last year. He had those 35 barrels. He's now got 25 home runs on 50 barrels, so, decent pop there. I know that we gave him a little bit of crap last year because it was just kind of like, I'm not sure exactly what he does super well, but he does contribute across the board. The runs in RBI are going to be interesting. Where are they projecting him to hit in that lineup? Because I was talking about on the Catcher podcast that I did with James Anderson and Dave McDonald, so they have him batting third. Like, it's not a great lineup.
No, that's what I was saying. It's not great, but you have to imagine once the lockout's over, they're making some more moves. Preller likes to trade.
I mean, Trent Grisham is okay. Tatis is obviously amazing. Machado's amazing. Cronenworth hitting third there.
Yep.
Hosmer after that. Will Meyer, it's just, although I'm kind of a Ha-Seong Kim fan this year, so I'm interested to see if he, if he can get into the lineup on a more regular basis. But yeah, so it's not that great of a lineup. So maybe those runs and RBI numbers are fair for him. It's just it's not, I just don't think there's the upside that there is with some other guys, like LeMahieu being one example. But, even with some of the guys going later, like CJ Cron, Josh Bell, even Ty France, where it's kind of like you can get them a little bit later in the draft. They're going to have relatively comparable batting averages to Cronenworth, probably not as good, but a lot more power, probably better counting stats. And then Cronenworth hasn't really shown that he will steal bases all that often, in his career thus far. He's got 7 in 835 plate appearances. So we're kind of hoping that he does because we know that the sprint speed is there, but he's only 7 for 11 on those attempts. He was only 4 for 7 last year. He's hitting in front of Machado, so maybe they're not giving him the green light for that reason. So just a lot of different things that maybe where it's he's fine, but I don't love him here. I think there's better later.
It's tough. Similar to DJ for me, as I'm not drafting him for first base. In my first base rankings, I have him ranked 21st at first base because I don't want him at first base. Now, if you look at my other rankings, he's much higher because I prefer him at second base, maybe even as a middle infield option later on. Probably not shortstop even. It's nice to have the flexibility, but he's not really a first baseman for me. I love the hit tool. The lineup scares me more than I thought it would when looking at that earlier today. But I still think there's more to Jake there if they can just get the right. If he's hitting between Tatis and Machado, he's getting a lot of pitches to hit. So there's a little strategy to that as well by building him in the lineup there. But I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think we saw some really, really good spots from Jake last year. We also saw some slumps when he was banged up last year. Be interesting to see where he kind of pans out for sure. The 10th and final first baseman off the board in the top 10 here is Jared Walsh of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, going to pick 126. Walsh is a fun one. 29 home runs last year, hit 277, 98 RBIs, struck out 28% of the time. So he's got that going for him. Massive BABIP as well, but that comes with hitting the ball hard. The projections still like him, 27 to 30 home runs, give or take. The average drops quite a bit, though, more like a 250 to 260 guy, which probably seems a little more reasonable, all things considered, because they have his BABIP dropping quite a bit to kind of even things out there. But there's no doubting how hard he hits the ball, how consistent he hits the ball. He barrels it up all over the place. There's a lot to like with him, but a massive ground ball guy that puts up that kind of production is pretty interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, he's definitely interesting. I have not grabbed him yet, even though he shows up as one of the better values on the spreadsheet, or he did. It's interesting. I wonder if the BatX has him. Yeah, the BatX has him as has the worst projection for him. So I had like ATC and Steamer combined, and now I've added in the BatX for hitters and the bat for pitchers, and definitely likes him the least from batting average and power perspective, and counting stats. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like the batting average is definitely higher than I think it should be. The power is fairly legit, and I think one thing to think about, this I should actually check, would be like what his home road splits are. They're actually not that different, because Anaheim plays as the best left-handed power park in the baseball. I have seen in some places. And so, that's definitely going to help him out considerably. And I was listening to a podcast, and I cannot remember which one it was. Maybe I was listening to the stream that Justin and Dave were doing yesterday, but I think they were talking about Jared Walsh and his platoon splits. Like, he has a really low batting average, I think. When he's hitting left-handed, yeah, he hits 196, but he has a decent amount of power. Let's see, what do we got? Actually, maybe I'm lying there. Maybe it was just last year then. Maybe it was last year. I was looking at his career. Maybe it was just in 2021 that was the case. But no, although hit 170, he hit 10 home runs though from the left side of the plate. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. 48 WRC plus doesn't seem good any way you shake it, or a 241 WOBA. So whatever I was listening to, I disagree with them. So there is like the platoon element that maybe you're concerned about with Walsh. I struggle with the other first baseman on the board, longer track record, similar profile. Grabbing him where he's going, because he's, like you said, he's going like 10th. He's going in that 125-ish range. And you can wait another 30 picks and pick up guys that are still relatively similar to him. So I'm not that into him. Sorry, Jared.
Yeah, that's my problem with him as well. Like, I like the hit tool, I like the power. There's a lot of question marks. Like, I believe the projections when they have him dropping in batting average, because even if you look at the X stats, not the end all be all, but they even showed that he outperformed his batting average by a good probably 20 to 30 points as well. And most of the projections have him dropping 20, 15 to 20 points. And a lot of that's BABIP related, as you mentioned. So we'll have to wait and see. Like, I'm not as worried about the platoon as I think some others are, because you're still going to play him at first base more often than not, I believe, because you have Ohtani DH, and I doubt he plays too much outfield. Trout will be back, which would be nice, and I guess you do have Adele and Marsh and some other guys, so you have a lot of moving pieces. But I think they're going to want to keep Walsh's power out there for now. But we'll see. Maybe they have so many options. If he scuffles at all, they'll kind of be like, you know what? We're going to take a little breather here and see where it goes. We played 144 games last year, which I think is pretty darn good for his first full campaign. And I think if he does that again, he's good for 25 plus. But like you said, there's a lot of 25 plus coming up right after him at the first base position. And that's what makes it a fun position, like we talked about at the beginning, strategy-wise. Like, do you want to take a stud early, or do you want to wait on a lot of similar players? Like Toby tweeted it out. It was so funny for people that have been doing drafts. Like Rob Silver commented and others, is this 25 to 30 home run guy is all over first base. There's a ton of them if you want to strategize, however you want to say it, around it to make it interesting. For this next portion, picks 11 through 20 ADP wise, we're gonna take two guys each like usual. And I left. It's funny too, because I almost took the first one, but I knew you liked him, so I left him because I could literally
you stole one of my guys.
I could almost take like almost all these guys if I really wanted to. I could make arguments for most of them, but it's CJ Cron, Josh Bell, Ty France, Reese Hoskins, Joey Vado, Tyler Stevenson, big guy, Tyler Stevenson, Alex Kirilloff, Anthony Rizzo, Max Muncy, Trey Mancini. That ranges from pick 131 to pick 189. So literally 60 picks, 4 rounds. You can get all of these first basemen. So if you want to wait, and it's a fun section because if like you like a good chunk of these guys, you can basically wait for someone to take the first one and go, okay, that means my next pick. I got like someone can start the run and you don't feel like you're going to miss out type situation. It's kind of a nice thing with this range. So Toby, who is your first of 2 picks in this range you'd like to discuss?
I've chose Josh Bell because I think one of the ways that he differentiates himself from this crew, at least a little bit, is with the batting average. I think that, last year, like, we were worried he was broken after 2020, if you remember. But he put it together. He had close to a, highest contact rate since 2018. So he was making a ton of contact with the ball. He was, destroying it, like 150, close to 116 max EV. He had 35 barrels, 27 home runs, so maybe a little high there. 8.8% barrel rate, but he also had a ground ball rate that was like 53.5%, and so last year he had 55.7. This year he had 53.5. In previous seasons, he's had 44, 48.5, 51.1, and 50. So if, big if, but if he can get into the 40s, with his ground ball rate, I think you're talking about a handful more home runs. He could be among the league leaders in RBI solely because he's going to be hitting, behind Juan Soto, who's going to be on base, over 40% of the time. The Nationals Park is really nice. They now don't have any competition for him, so he's not going to be like platooning with Ryan Zimmerman anymore. He's going to be playing every day. He only had 568 plate appearances last year. I really think that he can be a pretty big difference maker with the batting average, power, and just overall contributions that he's going to make. And there's another gear there that we've seen, in bits and pieces throughout his career. And if he could just put together that one season, where he kind of puts it all together, it could be pretty massive. So we'll see.
Yep, no problem with Josh Bell in my book. My first guy, and it's just on brand for the show, and I have his autographed baseball above my TV, thanks to our wonderful trivia contest that we take place in every year. But Reese Hoskins. Reese's Pieces is a diehard fan of the show. I really bet he is.
Oh,
I'm a diehard fan of Reese Hoskins.
He DMs me after every show.
I believe it.
Just to say how good of a show it was.
And it's because he talked about his teammate too and JTR the way you do. So it's a big deal for him. But last year we saw it coming back. 27 home runs. He hit 29 and 34 his last 2 full seasons. He got hurt, but he was absolutely mashing before he got hurt. Average was there before he got hurt because he started out slow last season. So you'll see a 247 average. Like, whatever. But he was crushing it towards the end. And the 27 home runs, he was on pace for probably a good 35 to 40 home runs. He only did that in 107 games, which is pretty nice. You got projection sites have him for 30 to 35 homers, playing in less than 130 games this next year. He's never been a big batting average guy. He has learned to accept that. 247 last year would have been his best batting average since 2017. So that's pretty solid. But the power is what you go for, and that'll result in runs scored and RBIs because in those 107 games, 64 runs, 71 RBIs. Obviously, you can prorate things out to like 130 games, and you're getting like 80 to 90 in each category, and you're very, very happy with life because you waited on the position and got an absolute stud. Strikeout rate stayed similar, walked a little less this last year, but the overall skill set is pretty darn good. The barrel rate, 17% was the best of his career. Hard hit rate, 46.3% was the best of his career. Like I said, he was destroying baseballs. And even the X stats show he slightly underperformed what the metrics might have given him on this one. But, it's Reese is a very, very powerful guy as long as you're willing to accept the batting average woes. And usually he's a great OBP guy, so the 10% walk rate was kind of a surprise from Reese Hoskins this last year. So I love everything about him. The fly ball rate's pretty similar. Ground ball rate's pretty similar last year. Not too much to worry about there. It's strictly, to me, an injury thing. He swung a little more outside the zone this last year, but he also swung more inside the zone. He's swinging more often, which is what you like to see, at least what I like to see, because it's at least it's a consistency thing. It's not just one thing or the other. He's doing it everywhere, but the contact rates stayed similar to last year. The O contact is down since 2019, which is kind of a bummer, but in line with pretty much his other powerful seasons. So we can live with that. But you know what you're going to get with Reese Hoskins as long as he's on the field, which is an if from time to time with Reese Hoskins. But you're in line for 30-plus home runs, one of the fewer guys to do that, because I think most guys we could say 20-ish, 25, but Reese can get you 30 to 40 if things really, really run well. But the power numbers, but with Harper there, with Real Muto there, lots of talent in Philadelphia. Like I love Reese Hoskins. The ballpark's very conducive to power. Just stay healthy, Reese. Just stay healthy, and big things can happen. So Reese Hoskins is the guy that I have circled as one of my guys in this range.
I would have taken him, honestly. I mean, he's so good. And a couple things one thing you mentioned there is like the batting average. I mean, if you look at his career, 247, 245, 226, 246, 259, it's really just that 1 year that he's been a huge batting average suck. And with batting average where it is today, 257 average, and, average in fantasy, like it's not hurting you as much. And like the runs, he has a career 311 runs and 326 RBI. So where there's all these guys that give you like very few runs and a lot of RBI at first base, like he provides you with both. So I absolutely agree with your choice.
Sweet. Who's your next guy?
Next guy,
I didn't take him on purpose.
I cheated. He's not in the top 20. He's not 11 to 20. But I don't.
It's your guy.
I don't know if I'm allowed. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, go for it.
Yuli Gurriel is my guy. I mean, what does Yuli have to do to get a little bit of respect every single season? The guy just contributes, and every single season he keeps on falling further and further behind in drafts. I mean, what is happening here? The dude's gonna hit 290 plus. He's gonna hit you 15 to 20 home runs. He's gonna get you 80, runs. He's gonna get you 80 RBI. You might steal a bag or two. Like that batting average late at the first base position or at corner infield is just so golden. And he's gonna play every day. He's gonna hit in the middle of that lineup. Like he's just so underrated from my perspective, and I love him, and I continue to just have him a lot of different places, and I'll continue to do that.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Like I've slowly become a later round Gurriel fan, especially in these DCs as like my second first baseman. There's a lot of stability there. Put him there, corner infield at times, just plug him in. Like you've sold me on him in the past. He's going to play pretty much every day, quality at bats. There's really nothing he's going to hurt your team with. Like you're not going to get 30 home runs anymore, but everything else he does is just consistently good. And they haven't projected hit in the middle of that order again. So it's there's not a whole lot to complain about Gurriel. He's just getting older, and like the power is like slowly going away, but everything else is still pretty darn good. So zero complaints with you on that one. My guy, Joseph Vado, was absolutely amazing last year, as most know. Just a power machine, 36 home runs in 129 games. It's been well documented that he was selling out plate discipline, being more aggressive, one would say, for the batting average, because he hit 266, but 261 back in 2019, and that's when the drop started. 284 in 2018 started slowly dropping, but he still walked 14.4% of the time. He still had a 375 OBP last year, which is absolutely insane for a guy that hit 266 with an OBP at 375. So the plate discipline to me still looked pretty darn good. He's just more aggressive, I guess, with this swing approach in the zone is what it really came down to, because the ISO was through the roof at 297. He was just a monster, and I don't see it changing anytime soon, especially playing in Great American Small Park, where he's going to get so many cheapies in that ballpark, and not many of us were cheapies to begin with. But when you go from a 9% barrel rate in 2020 to 6.4% in 2019 to 17.2 last year with a 53% hard hit rate when you've lived in the 30s your entire career, even if some regression shows up and he's now like a 12% barrel guy and a 45% hard hit guy, he's still hitting you 25 to 30 home runs. Like he's still going to absolutely destroy baseballs. And like I said, he's getting more aggressive. He's selling out for power, but the plate discipline's so good that he's not going to crush you in what you're doing. So he's quality there. He's going to have Jonathan India hitting in front of him. He's going to have like Stevenson there. He's going to have other aspects in that Reds lineup, whatever they mix and match and get guys in there. He's still going to be very, very productive. You're paying more than last year, of course. Like I picked him up on the waiver wire. Other guys did last year. But I think he's a beast. I think he's in that fun realm here with the Bells and the Belts and all these guys that we talk about. So I'm a huge Vado fan. I've grabbed him in a few leagues as my corner infielder. Like, I'm willing to play him at first base if I need to. Like, if I just totally miss on the position, I think he's still going to be that good. And when this DH comes into play, he's one of those guys that's going to give him like 4 or 5 more years on his career probably, because the hit tool I don't think it's going to leave with Vado anytime soon. So I'm a big fan. He's like we could say he's the National League version of Jose Abreu. Let's go with that. I think there's a lot to be said about Joseph Vado. And if he does it again this year, he's going to be getting drafted next to Jose Abreu next year. So enjoy the value while you still can is the way I look at it with Joseph Vado. So big fan.
Love it.
All right. 21 and later ADP guys. Who's your one target?
I kind of cheated because he's not that far back, but I did want to talk about Bobby Dalbeck. I think he's really good. I think he's going to force his way into that lineup. The dude just absolutely crushes. He had 25 home runs last year and 453 plate appearances. He had 53 barrels last year for 20.2% barrels per batted ball event. He had almost as many barrels as Joey Votto had last year, which is just nuts. And I think what's most impressive about Dalbeck, and again, like, he's got to make it and play on a regular basis. But what's most impressive with him is if you look at his rolling average graphs, just some of the improvements that he made, over the course of the year in a variety of different categories. And I think it was kind of talked about how Kyle Schwarber had a really positive impact on him, in kind of teaching him like how to hit the ball and where to hit the ball. But you saw like surging contact rates, especially overall contact rates toward the end of last year, still low at 67.7%, but much higher than about the 62%, 63% that he was averaging throughout his career before then. The hard hit rate surged as well, 44%. Ground ball rate fell to 29%, so he's hitting the ball in the air a ton. The O swing, improved as well, 32%. So he's really improving across the board in every single area that you really want to see those improvements happening. The batted ball quality is just filthy. I think it's just a matter of him getting into that lineup, and I think he will get there because I think the bat just plays too well, for him not to. It's just, it just absolutely crushes. So is Schwarber's a free agent? Is that right?
Yes, he is.
He is. So Dalbeck's penciled him for first base right now. Whether or not he ends up being there, like, the dude's just good. I mean, he mashes, and the batting average isn't going to be fantastic, but if he can get that just slightly under 30%, for that K rate, he's got 35 home run plus power, and he'll be in a really nice lineup, and it'll be really fantastic. It'll be beautiful.
Yeah, Dalbeck's a fun one. Dalbeck's definitely one. I'm with you on that. It's like there's definitely risk, very clear risk, but man, you want to talk risk reward later in the draft, like he could put up some astronomical numbers, like you mentioned. What he did in the second half, the developments he made. If I didn't know the Kyle Schwarber stuff that you mentioned, but just looking at it, because we even joked about it last year, like he's going to hit everything hard, but he's going to swing and miss at like 70% of it. It feels like so, but he made some great adjustments, and it definitely showed as he got better and better. And he's young. We got to remember that these kids are making adjustments as they learn on the big league level, and a lot to be said about that. And he showed some big improvements. So I'm with you on that. He's a fun one. Like I think I have one share. I have one share so far. I like him a lot. I paired him with, I think, Josh Bell and Brandon Belt. I took like 3 guys in this range because I didn't have any first baseman yet. So like I paired them all. It's like we're going to roll the dice and see what happens in the DC format. So very, very intriguing option for sure. There's a lot of interesting ones. If you need like 20 home run guys in this range, there's some good later options, just not as many. Like you're going to get like 2 to 3 categories maybe as you get deeper in here. But one guy, it's kind of a personal thing because I've always wanted him to be awesome, and he's got a chance to get regular playing time now, and that's Rowdy Tellez. I am a huge Rowdy Tellez fan, projected to hit like 5th or 6th in the Brewers lineup. Roster Resource has him platooning with Mike Brosu. I'm sorry, like maybe, I guess. Like we know Brosu can hit lefties well, but Rowdy's that good, and if there's a DH, it's going to be hard to keep that bat out of the lineup. He even hit lefties okay last year. It's like he's not like he's a complete suck against lefties, and that power is pretty darn good. We saw him hit 11 home runs in 106 games last year, hit 242, but man, even the projections, he's only playing like 113 games. I got him for 20 homers. I think we could legit see like a 130 to 140 game season from Rowdy if he's a starting first baseman / DH for the Brewers. So we're getting closer to that 25-30 range potentially, which he's got the power to do that. We've seen his hard hit skills through the roof. His 11.6% barrel rate last year, 48% hard hit rate. Hard hit rate was the best of his career. I know like people hate X stats. I've started to learn that more and more, but there's still a fun reference when the gap is as big as it is with his X stats. They kind of stood out in a big way for me. So he, they might say, got unlucky at times, but he's a decent sized ground ball guy compared to fly ball, but a ton of line drives. And that's one of those things that you can get that little switch, because last year he only had a 12.4% home run to fly ball, and in years past it was 21% or better. That's quite a drop off. So literally, it could be like a slight little tweak, and now he's in Miller Park can go big ways for him. He's going to pick 310. He's a 32nd first baseman off the board. So it's one of those things I like to talk about. You're going to get a starting first baseman after pick 300 that if he plays like 130 games could be a phenomenal asset to your fantasy team. So in a regular redraft, you probably won't even draft him. So he's a fab acquisition. But people drafting right now are doing draft champions, NFBC 50s, 12-teamers. He's a phenomenal later pick to me if you kind of get a couple first basemen early. So I love Rowdy Tellez. I think he's one of those guys that this time next year we could be talking about like in our Dalbeck range maybe, or even that next range up potentially if he gets the 130 to 140 games. So the hit tool's always been there. It's just been consistent playing time, which he finally looks to be getting in Milwaukee, which I'm very much looking forward to. All right, let's do a couple player debates here before we get to some listener questions. But first base, CJ Cron, pick 131. Josh Bell, pick 134. Who do you got?
Oh, man, it's a tough one. I mean, Cron's really good. I'm going to go with Bell here. And the reason I'm going to go with Bell is I think like Cron, he just doesn't play that much, like
Even if
547, 500. I know, but like injury wise, like he doesn't like 547 plate appearances, 499, 560, 373, 445, like he's never really played that full season. I think they're remarkably similar. You do a really good job of picking these ones where, they're both should have good batting average for like the first baseman that go in this area. Cron maybe like slightly more power, but on a per plate appearance basis, but I wouldn't put it past Bell to get higher there. I think Bell has a slightly better context, just even though Cron is in Coors, like that lineup just is going to be bad. It's going to be, it's not good. And Nationals ballpark plays really well for lefties, and he's also a switch hitter, so he's going to play every day. So, I think he'll get more plate appearances or at least more opportunity for it. And so I would lean Bell in this particular instance. He's also going a little bit later than Cron is too. I don't even think it's not even around, right? But
just three picks, 131 and 134. They're right next to each other.
Yeah. So I'll lean Bell here slightly, but I also maybe have a little bit of a bias against CJ Cron for some reason because I never really consider picking him there. So that's probably also on me. They're fine. They're fine picks, both of them.
Yeah, it's a fun one because most people will see Cron, Coors Field, and it's easy. But it's not that easy. That's why it's a fun conversation because you highlighted Josh Bell earlier. We've talked about him on the review show of how he kind of snuck into the Razzball player rater. That would have surprised people. He's really, really good, and playing with Juan Soto is going to be huge. Cron and Coors, there's no doubt in it. It's going to help his batting average a ton like we saw last year, best of his career. But it also took some of his power away because that's some people don't pay attention to that with Coors Field from time to time. I lean CJ Cron still, but I'm fine with Josh Bell. Like Josh Bell, I think you're right where Josh Bell could have that next step. That could be tremendous. Where CJ Cron, I think we've kind of seen what he is, and that's why he's kind of almost going to be reliable at times as long as he plays enough, and that's kind of nice to have. But Josh Bell might be the right option. I'm going to take Cron though, but it's very, very close. If you just want to wait and take Josh Bell, I have zero problem with that at all. Next up, Frank Schwendell at pick 228, Nathaniel Lowe at pick 229.
Oof, this one's pretty tough. I'm actually leaning Schwendell here. I think Schwendell is actually like pretty good. I mean, across the board, like there's no skill that's particularly overwhelming, but he seems to have the first base job locked up. He makes a lot of contact, 78% overall contact, very high end zone contact rate. He chases a little bit, but you're not as concerned when you see contact rates like that. Strikeout rate at 15.8%. Power, like the batting average, yeah, he's probably not going to have a 348 BABIP, that's for sure. So he's not going to hit 326. But I think with the low K rate, he should have a decent batting average. The batted ball quality is also, decent enough, like 16 barrels, 8% barrel rate. So I kind of lean him a little bit in this particular one. Low is like, he's good, but I don't know. I haven't really seen that like power that I want to see, although he does have a higher barrel rate. So maybe I would go
a lot of ground
low.
balls, this thing.
It's a lot of ground balls, but maybe low.
Could be the next Josh Bell. Could make that adjustment.
I know, but
it's tough. Why they go next to each other?
It is tough. It is tough. I'm going to go with Schwendell for right now, just because I said him first, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Yeah, it's neck and neck. I have shares of both of these guys. Like, really goes back to my saying, when like one guy goes, you can kind of watch the domino effect and jump in, and it's kind of like whoever's left at that point, I take one of these two. It feels like more often than not. But I think the deciding factor for me, and it's maybe just kind of cherry picking here, because I love Frank Schwendell. I think the batting average is actually, he's not going to hit 326, but projections like the bad X has him at 248. I think he's much more like a 280-ish. Like, he's a legit good hitter, is what I'm trying to say. With some pop, he's going to hit towards the top of that order, score some runs. Doesn't steal, though. Nate Lowe will steal you some bags, which is kind of interesting. So, again, cherry picking here. Just kind of like trying to decipher between the two. And I'm still a believer in Lowe's power. Like, I'm with you. We haven't seen it yet, but it's there. Like, we saw it in the minors. We saw glimpses of it at time. But, 18 homers isn't horrible. And he played 157 games, 642 at-bats. He could still get you 15 to 20 home runs again, steal some bags. And I think the biggest thing that I like about Nate Lowe is, they've picked up Simeon and Seager, which could be humongous benefactors for him in front of him to drive in runs. It could be more runs to drive in potentially, as long as they don't drive them all in, of course. But it could lead to him, or maybe he hits between them or hits in front of them, or there's a lot of ways that could change things up. So I'm going to go Lowe. I'm going to go Nathaniel Lowe. But it's very interesting. And the other thing is Schwendell could get traded for all we know, and that makes it tough. Obviously, you're not drafting with that in mind, but the Cubs are doing goofy things, and he's older, so they could make some moves if they have to. All right, last one I got here for you. I got two more. Sorry, Brandon Belt at 240 versus your boy Bobby Dalbeck at 242. So do you want all of the home runs, or do you want a guy that almost broke out big time last year?
Oh man, Bubba, you got to stop with these. These are too difficult. I can't handle them at all. I'm gonna go.
You want the bag? I'm gonna power.
I'm gonna go with Dalbeck. I'm gonna go with Dalbeck here.
Yeah, I'm going Belt. I like the batting average. I think the power is legit. It's just been a health thing, and the health the last few years is just getting hit by pitches. So it's not like it's the crazy injuries. So I'm gonna take my chances with Brandon Belt again. But again, nothing wrong with Dalbeck. We talked about him earlier. Nothing wrong at all.
Like, here's a question on Belt. Not a criticism, because we all love Brandon Belt, but like, what's the most RBI he's had in a single season?
Yeah, I got his page up right now. It's not a lot. It's
82, right?
Yeah.
What's the most runs he's had in a single season? 77, right? What's the most home runs he's had in a season? 29, right? So let's assume he hits career highs in home runs, 29, runs, 77, RBI, 82. It just doesn't do it for me. You know what I'm saying?
That's
fair.
What
I'm saying? And not a criticism of you choosing him, but just like...
No, I get it. Yeah.
I could see Dalbeck just crushing things.
Monster. No, I Dalbeck literally, he could be your next Big Meat Pete type guy. Like I totally get it. Like he could be. So you're gonna get Big Meat
Hey,
Pete Jr.
don't undersell Big Meat Pete like that. All right.
But he's got that power potential for you. Where Belt is good, it's just stay on the field. If he can play 130 plus games, I'm a big fan of what we got there. But it's a big if at time. But I just like I don't know. I think it's a safer floor where Dalbeck's got that ceiling. So kind of pick your poison in that regard. The last one I have, it's a fun one. First base outfield eligible, both these guys. You got Lamont Wade Jr. sticking with the Bay Area boys at 309. Yoshi Satsugo at 312.
Oh, dude, Yoshi all day.
I had a feeling. I had
Yoshi
to throw
all
him out there.
day. I mean, I think that the problem is that Lamont Wade is gonna platoon. There's no way he gets out of that platoon there.
Well,
and
the injuries got him a lot of playing time because he played first base and outfield, but it's tough.
Yeah, and I think Yoshi is going to play pretty much every day there for the Pirates in that lineup. He improved dramatically. I think it was Jeff Zimmerman that had his kind of rolling average graph up, and he just really seemed to thrive when he got to Pittsburgh and he was playing every day and he was having that opportunity. So I think the plate appearances in the middle of that lineup, playing every single day, I think I will go in that direction. I think because I like Yoshi Tsutsugo.
Yeah, I like Yoshi as well because I think he's gonna have regular playing time, like you said. That's a big difference. Like if we knew Wade was gonna be locked into playing time, I like that profile a ton. But Yoshi should be the dude in Pittsburgh, so kind of makes it a little easier in that regard, but a fun one nonetheless. All right, listener questions. We had a lot of them from you guys.
We got a lot of them, Bubba. We're an hour and 35 minutes in, ladies and gentlemen.
So this is a test to Toby here. This is a test to Toby. We're going to skip Rob Silver because he's being funny, but I'm going to give him respect. He asked if, which player projected for 250 and 25 and 0 failed to hit 25. The whole thing. It was funny. It was a joke to the tweet. But JB at Beat Rick and Frank asks, do we like Hunter Dozier for a comeback player?
Yeah, I don't mind Hunter Dozier at all. I mean, he's going really late. He's going in the early to mid 300s. I like, he doesn't have first base eligibility. Oh man, he came one game short in the NFBC. So I haven't really been thinking about him from a first base perspective, but I've always liked Dozier a lot. I think he struggled very clearly through injury all of last year with the thumb that really hurt his batting, but he started to put it together towards the end of the season. And I think he's the type of guy where, again, health is a major issue. He's only had 500 plate appearances. Well, he's had it twice, in two of the last three, well, I guess in the last 2 full seasons. But he's a guy who can put it all together in stretches, that are very, very impressive. I mean, where he's got elite plate discipline, elite contact, elite ground ball in terms of low ground ball rate, and then he's just absolutely hitting the ball hard. And so I think he struggled a lot with the thumb last year. I think he's going to play every day. He's going to steal you a handful of bases. He's going to hit 15 to 20 home runs. The batting average is a little bit of a sore spot, but I do think that he's capable of hitting above that. I mean, I think I could see him hitting 250 with 20 home runs, 5 stolen bases, and 70 or something like that. Similar to that 2019 season was kind of his pinnacle. But I think that's an example of what you could see again. He's 30, so he's not super old yet.
Yeah, I like Hunter Dozier. I got kind of told that's foolish by a couple of very smart people the other day on Twitter, one being Vlad Sedler, Anthony Gialdi, and Vin Armbarn. So Ryan Venancio. So I was told I was being, foolish for hoping good things about him, but I agree with everything you said. I've dug in on Ryan Dozier many years, and I love what I see from him. I keep buying back in because his price gets cheaper and cheaper. It's like, I think two of them are Royals fans, so they're kind of jaded in that situation. But if where he's going in a draft, if you can get me close to 15 to 20 homers with, like you said, 5 to 10 steals and be productive, I think that's pretty outstanding. They're worried about consistent playing time. I'm like, I don't see where he wouldn't play regularly, but somewhere between the outfield and third base right now looks good, unless they just really want to put out, but they want to put Mondesi at DH. So like it makes perfect sense to play Dozier. So until I hear otherwise, I like Dozier quite a bit. They were more concerned about his swing and miss and his batting average woes, but I'm not quite there. All right. Big John Stud, MLB moving average, Johnny L. Better chance of maintaining huge disciplinary gains from 2021. Big Meat Pete the Polar Bear or Matt Olson? I already know your answer.
Big Meat Pete.
Yeah, it's Big Meat Pete. We talked about it quite a bit earlier. So yeah, it's Big Meat Pete. We're both on board on that one. All right. Ben Tid at Breaking Ben _T asks, what are your guys' thoughts on the takes that say don't draft the guys going in the 50 to 90 range and instead take those in the Vado range, early to mid 100s? Are the ones that say skip the Vado range and draft guys in the 200s like Belt instead? So do you want to skip the early guys and get the Vado range, or just go, or for your sake, the Bell range? Or do you want to go another like 100 picks and get a guy there? Where do you prefer to get your
I like the middle. I like that middle ground. I like the Bell, Hoskins. I haven't gotten Vado yet, but I can see myself doing that now. I feel a little bit more comfortable going there. So I'd much rather be in that range. The one kind of exception to that is Yuli, is a guy that if I wait, I'm probably targeting him. Or maybe Dalbeck if I want to get aggressive.
There you go. Yeah, no, I kind of want one of those mid guys too in there, and then I have no problem backing it up with the next guy. I got a corner infield spot because at that point in the draft, third base kind of sucks. So yeah, I have no problem getting a second guy for sure. Liam at Freed Minds asks, if you double tap starting pitchers in the first and second rounds, what type of players are you targeting in the third and fourth round?
If I double tap
starting pitchers in the first two rounds, what type of players are you looking for at your third and fourth pick?
I'm generally looking for a balanced approach, a balanced player. So let me just look at the ADP here. Let me see what we're working with. So if I double tap pitchers, I'm looking at like a Teoscar Hernandez or a Tim Anderson or a Trevor Story or a Sal Perez, just because I think he's that much better, than a lot of the guys going here. Even a Xander Bogaerts, just because the consistency is key. He was injured last year. The stolen bases are a little light, but I think he contributes everything. Tyler O'Neill, JTR, for sure. I mean, maybe Goldie. I don't know. So those are kind of the guys that I'm more interested in kind of looking at the third round and the fourth round. I've also been going in my DCs. I've also been getting a closer oftentimes in there as well. So it's not necessarily two hitters going right there. I mean, I could just tell you, like, let's see. I started off in one draft, Scherzer, Luis Robert, Emmanuel Clase, Salvador Perez. In another one, it was Harper, Wheeler, Iglesias, O'Neill. In another one, it was Scherzer, Wheeler, Diaz, Perez. That's my Mondesi one. Absolutely. So it really depends. And you got to think out. I think a really good thing is to think about the back end of the draft first and who you think you're going to be able to get in those spots, and then work your way forward from there. So if you feel confident in being able to get some of those like 10 to 15 stolen base guys later, then do it.
Yeah, no, that's kind of, I didn't take two pitchers really, but taking Vlad early feels like I still need to find those 10 to 15 stolen base guys. So it's kind of it's a strategy I get, but like you said, maybe a closer as one of your two picks more often than not. I've been a big Teoscar guy in round threes if I can get him. I love Teoscar, so I like that call quite a bit. Tyler O'Neill, like you said, like those would be the kind of guys I'd be looking to get. Those the last of the kind of 5 category dudes. I'd be trying to get one of those for sure. Ryan Roof asks, our buddy from RotoWire, Paul Goldschmidt, where does he rank on Toby's sheet? He ranked favorably in mine and took him at pick 55, but it doesn't feel sexy.
Recalculating my sheet, Ryan. Unfortunately, it looks like he's last. He's last on my list. Ryan, I'm sorry, you really messed up our draft that we're in together. It's really too bad. You had a shot, and then you drafted Paul Goldschmidt. No, we talked about him extensively. I think he's very solid where he's going right now. You know, the little bit of the plus on the stolen bases, and I think you feel pretty solid about the other 4 category production wise. So I'm not generally going after first baseman in this area because I think you can kind of make up ground elsewhere. But if you're going to take a first baseman in this area, I think Goldie is a good way to go.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like we said, he'd be, if I'm going to take a guy early, he's pretty much the one. Otherwise, we sit back and we wait and enjoy the ride. Joe McHugh asks, in all seriousness, given positional flexibility, how comfortable are you using first base as a streaming kind of mixed thing, or a streaming mix and match position in a 15-team fab league?
Yeah, I mean, I might feel okay, but I mean, if you think about it, like, right, you're talking about the top 450 players, right?
It's
So, like, let's see, who are the first basemen going after pick 450?
Yeah, it's not great.
It's like Miggy, Prado, Profar, Casas, Edwin Rios, Jace Peterson, Lewin Diaz. So there's like some guys who could be interesting for sure and cobble it together, but I'm not seeing any like outside of maybe Miggy, like guys who are going to start and play every single day.
And they're going to really drain your average or something. Like they're going to drain categories for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe corner infield, because then you're looking at first base and third base combined, you know, and obviously some guys are going to get injured. So those guys are going to move up. So it's all dependent. But like looking right now, first base is pretty dead after pick 450. There's not a ton of guys that I'm interested in there, but certainly it's possible.
Yep, it's possible. So you can do it. I prefer not to. Let's put it that way. Eric Samolsky asks, if the new stadium causes Mountcastle to become a 25 to 27 home run bat, poor exit velocity and balls in the air with a more cavernous park, how far are you dropping him from current ADP? Seems to fall closer to the next tier down at first baseman. Like I said, I haven't ranked, even before the fence change, I had him ranked kind of after that Hoskins, Bell, Vado, all that group already. So I don't think he drops that far. That's how far I would drop him, though.
Yeah, I mean, like, straight up now, tell me I'd go Reese Hoskins over Ryan Mountcastle, probably. I mean, if we're just being honest, like right now, straight up, I do Josh Bell over him. So I absolutely think he's in that other category, probably for me. I do CJ Crone over him.
Yep.
Yeah. I wouldn't do Jared Walsh, I don't think, but like I do Vado over him probably.
There's a good chunk of them. Yeah. So there you go, Eric. There's a grouping you can kind of pass on if you'd prefer. Yeah. Dave Swan at Davithius says Jared Walsh had a hot first half while Josh Bell was great in the second half, yet both were bad for half of a season. Of these two, who is more likely to put it all together for one very big season? Pretty sure you're a Josh Bell guy.
Oh, Josh Bell for sure. Yeah. I mean, you guys can tell I'm like biased towards Josh Bell, right? I'm only seeing the good. I'm only seeing the good people. I mean, Jared Walsh is fine. You know, he's no Josh Bell, but no, I mean, he's going to be like with Mike Trout and he's going to be with Shohei and they're going to be a really good offense, you know, that top of the lineup. I think they could both do really well. I think I believe more in Bell, and I may also be jaded slightly by a dynasty league trade where I picked up Jared Walsh at the end of the 2020 season, and then traded him midseason last year because I thought he was going to totally collapse, and he didn't. And I traded him for like 4 scrub closers that half of them didn't work out. So whatever.
Those are always
just fun. Being real with all of you.
Those are always fun. Simon P has a question. How about a deep dive on Lewin Diaz in Miami? How much does he play if we have a DH, and what can we expect if he gets a full-time job at first base? I'm in 2 NL-only leagues, but can apply to best ball and draft and holds as well. Thanks, fellas, and good to be back. I think if they get the DH, it helps him a ton. I think they want to give him run because they gave him some run last year. He just really struggled batting average-wise, but the power is legit. We've seen it in all the minor league levels. I think he gets a good run this year personally, but so NL only, I think he's fine. I just don't like, he's more of a fab acquisition for me in redrafts.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to say. I don't know. Has anybody made the like Finding Lewin Diaz joke? Isn't there a movie called like Finding Lewin
I think I know what
Davis?
you're talking about.
No, Inside Lewin Davis.
Yes.
Inside Lewin Davis. So we're gonna go with Inside Lewin Diaz. Inside Lewin Diaz. I don't know if I'm the first person to make that joke, but if I am, let's
It's all
see.
yours.
Lewin Diaz. Yeah. Sorry, guys. It's late. It's late here on the West Coast. Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking generally speaking. So let's just dive in. The batted ball profile looks pretty good. Low ground ball rates. Let's see. Is that the case in the minors too? Yeah, low ground ball rates throughout, which I really like a lot. Like maybe too low if it stays at 31.5%, but he's in like the high 30s, low 40s, I think, throughout the minors, which is kind of ideal. The fly ball rate's too high. The line drive rate is super low, which gives you like some pause about like what the barrel control looks like and how consistent, that the standard deviation of that launch angle might be. So keeping that BABIP super low. The O swing is awful. He's chasing pitches outside the zone. In the minors, he didn't really walk. He only had in the very early minors a couple seasons above 10%, which in the minors like isn't that great. The contact is solid though for like a power hitter. 75%. The K rate should stick around that 25%, 25% if he can hold on to that. Again, assuming that he can hold on to that. The StatCast data is all right. Like max EV on 116 batted ball events is 108.6, which is pretty mediocre. It's not Kevin Biggio, but it's pretty mediocre. Barrel rates at 10%, in those 116 plate appearances. If you can maintain that, that's obviously good. He's got 12 barrels, 8 home runs. So, again, like I think it's always best to kind of focus on the projections here. And what the projections tell us is, he's going to be a low batting average, good power, no speed guy, which, again, like I think he's a good, if you, I don't know. You can find Lewin Diaz. If you can get inside Lewin Diaz at like whatever pick he's at right now, I'm sure he's a good bet. Because I do think he could definitely get some run, and they want to give him a look. And he's got kind of a little bit of pedigree. They got him from the Twins, I think, right? He was in the Twin system.
Pick 524.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a great pick, honestly. At 524, of a lot of those guys I mentioned after pick 450, I feel like he's a guy who could get hot at the beginning of the season and be like a guy who hits 25, 30 home runs with 250, 240 batting average, which would be really solid from where you're getting him.
Like right now, Roster Resource doesn't have him starting on the team, which I don't know. I find that hard to believe. I know they made moves. They got Joey Wendell and they got Brian Anderson scheduled to DH on Roster Resource, which seems odd to me as well. Like I think you'd rather give Lewin Diaz at least a platoon shot at DHing or something with Aguilar or whatnot. So I think we see him unless he has a horrific spring training. I think he should be starting now with the big club. The power's legit. You mentioned some of the profile things. Even looking at his swings, his contact rates are good. He just swings so darn much. Like his overall swing is like 10% above average, let alone his O swing. But his O contact's just below average. His regular overall contact's just a little below average. So it's like if you just hone that in a little bit, he's young. So like hone it in a little bit and see what you can figure out. Hang out in the cage with Jesus Aguilar a while. Let him talk to you for a bit. And some of these other guys, you never know what he could pull out. But I think especially like a dynasty NL only, someone to definitely keep an eye on, if not take a late flyer on, because I think he could be a nice late power source for sure. Our Mark Carter is our final question for us. Can Joseph Vado do it again? Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes.
The question is, why not?
Can he? He will. It should be will he? Yes. Yes, he will. And it might be better. Like I said, the National League Jose Abreu. Come on down. So
wow,
let's do it.
I like that comp there.
It's the National League Jose Abreu. Let's go.
Damn, that's the way to end a podcast right there. Like that type of a comp.
Yep, we're gonna mic drop it and walk away.
Dude, you guys.
But that will wrap up our first base preview of the 2022 season. Final thoughts, Toby, as we wrap it up and get ready for second base next week.
Yeah, just thinking about it at the beginning of this show, we told you guys that this episode was going to be shorter than the catcher preview. But what we didn't consider is the fact that when you tune into this podcast, you tune into this podcast to get hard-hitting, in-depth analysis. And sometimes that takes time. So we will no longer promise you that the podcast that we're doing this week will be shorter than the one last week.
Our old previews took like 2.5 to 3 hours. So we're doing good.
We're getting better, people. We're getting better. But if you've reached this part of the podcast, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for thank you for listening to us.
Yes, it's always fun, and we enjoy doing it. So, gets us ready for the season. Lets us talk about some fun stuff. Sorry, we didn't get to make any picks for you. The pick will expire in about 50 minutes, right before it freezes. So we'll get to make our picks.
Oh, I know, it's brutal. Yeah. It's brutal, Drew. You're literally running out by 1 minute. Yeah, he's gonna run out by 1 minute,
which is great because now we can make our picks and go to bed because VA will not make a pick tonight. So we're good. But that's where the cookie crumble. Unfortunately, Drew.
Sorry, Drew. Always set
a cue.
Your auto.
Yeah. Yes.
Or your cue. Either one.
Both. But on that note, we will wrap it up here. First base preview in the books. Make sure you check out Toby on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I am at BDintric. We'll catch you guys next week.